Hi, this is Donna with Sparrowstudios7, bringing to you the commentary with I Read and I Learn for Genesis 21. Okay, so the first note for Genesis 21 covers Genesis verses 1 through 2. It actually wants me to go back to chapter 18, verse 10, so I'm going to do that now. So it says, "Then one of them said, I will return to you about this time next year, and your wife Sarah will have a son." So that was the prophecy 2 chapters ago, where the angel of the Lord, and the angels came to Abraham's tent, and Sarah was inside laughing because she didn't believe that she was going to have a son. And God was like, "No, you did laugh. You're going to have a kid." And so this is the fulfillment of that promise, this chapter. Okay, moving on. So verses 3 to 4, the commentary says, "Abraham responded in faith by naming his son Isaac and circumcising him according to the terms of the covenant." This covenant we saw back in Genesis 17, verses 9 through 14. The note for 21:5 says this: "Isaac was born 25 years after the promise was first given." We see that first given in chapter 12, verse 4. 21:6 through 7. Sarah was filled with joy and praise for this amazing event. Only God could enable her to have a child. Verse 6. Sarah's wordplay on the name Isaac, Hebrew Yitzhak, or Yitzhak, something like that. He laughs, shows that laughter of unbelief when the promise was given. We saw this happening in chapter 18, verse 12, when she was laughing in the tent. Had changed to laughter of joy at its fulfillment. Isaac's name could refer to the pleasure of God and of his parents at his birth. Sarah knew that everyone who heard about this would laugh with her and rejoice at the news. Commentary for verses 8 through 21. God used the incident of Ishmael's mocking Isaac to separate Ishmael and Hagar from the family and the child of promise. They would constantly threaten the promised descendant if they remained with the family. 21:8 through 9. This is the note for that. The feast for Isaac's weaning probably occurred when he was 3, and Ishmael about 17 years old. We note this in Genesis 16:16. Sarah saw Ishmael making fun of her son Isaac. The verb metzahek, making fun of, is related to the word for laughter. This theme in 21:6 is given a sour twist by Ishmael's mockery. In 21 verse 10, earlier Sarah mistreated Hagar and pressured her to leave. We saw this happening in Genesis 16 verse 6. When Hagar's son mistreated Isaac, Sarah demanded that slave woman and her son leave. Verses 11 through 13. The comment says, Abraham was upset by Sarah's demand to oust Hagar and Ishmael. God told him to comply, assuring Abraham that Ishmael would also have a future as Abraham's offspring. Verses 14 through 21. God again rescued Hagar in the wilderness and guaranteed her future. We see this happening in Genesis 16, verses 7 through 14, when she named him Baal Lahai Roy, the God who sees me. This passage is similar to chapter 16, but the differences are great. Here, Hagar and Ishmael are rescued, but there is no commemorative naming. God's earlier promise to Hagar is reiterated, but this time, Hagar is not told to return to Sarah. The repeated motifs on the 2 occasions confirms God's sovereign plan for Hagar and Ishmael. As Joseph told Pharaoh, the twofold event showed that God confirmed it. We'll see this happening in Genesis 41:32. God did not abandon Hagar and Ishmael, but met them in their despair, like he did in chapter 16 of Genesis, verse 7. Provided sustenance for them and promised again that Ishmael would found a great nation. We see this in 21 verse 13 and 16 verses 11 through 12. Paul uses this event in his letter to the Galatians to illustrate how God's people must relinquish all that threatens the fulfillment of God's promise. And that will be in Galatians 4:21 through 31, if you're interested. Looking that up. Okay. 21 verse 16, we're just moving right along. 100 yards, literally a bow shot. This description connects with Ishmael's vocation that we see in 21:20, where he became and God was with the boy as he grew up in the wilderness. He became a skillful archer. 21, commentary on verses 22 through 34. This passage, at its climax, explains the name Beersheba, Abraham's home. You see this in verses 31 through 34. Beersheba reflected the covenant Abraham made with the residents of the land, which enabled him to dwell there in peace and prosperity. God's promise was coming to fruition. We see his promise mentioned back in chapter 12, verse 7, 13, verses 14 to 17, verses 18 to 21, and again in 17, verse 8. Commentary on verses 21, chapter 21, verses 22 to 23 reads like this. Abimelech pressed for the treaty so that Abraham would not cheat or deceive him. Abimelech knew that God was blessing Abraham even though Abraham was not entirely trustworthy, because he had already lied to him last chapter, verse 9 through 10, when he said that Sarah was his sister and not his wife, and Abimelech had to receive prayer from Abraham after God warned him in a dream not to mess with their marriage covenant. This sad contradiction made the treaty necessary. By contrast, God's faithful people were exhorted or encouraged to speak the truth. We see this encouragement in Ephesians chapter 4:15 and verse 25 of chapter 4 in Ephesians as well. And Jesus warned against manipulating the truth by the clever use of oaths. We see this in Matthew 5:37 and in James 5:12. 21 verse 25. The commentary says this. The motif of the well appears again. We see it appearing in chapter 16 verse 14 and chapter 21 verse 19. God provided water, a symbol of blessing, in the barren wilderness, and later even brought water out of a rock for Israel. We see this in Exodus 15:22 through 27, Exodus 17:1 through 7, and Numbers 20:1 through 13. The note for 27 through 31 says, Abraham's gifts to Abimelech in chapter 20:14 secured his legal right to dwell peaceably in the land and to claim ownership of the well. Beersheba marked one step toward the fulfillment of God's promise. And then I'll end this part of the commentary with the note for 32. Actually, no, I'm gonna end it here. And just do the next video. But yeah, so all of that to say that chapter 21 is special because it's the fulfillment of all the promises. I'll be back in a moment to continue this commentary. Thank you very much.